So I'm going to go over now to my menu over here on the left under CIS. And here are the screens we marched through from top to bottom, starting at the top and then going down to the F and G statement. Parties and children, very straightforward. Who's the names of the parties, open their section, their dates, addresses, employer, tax filing status, etc. All very straightforward. Just tab through or mouse through this and fill in the information. Same section available for the other party. Unique to New Jersey in our software is if you have somebody who is working in New York City and paying New York City wage tax, or working in Connecticut and paying taxes there, if you click this green More button, you'll see a place in the software that allows you to specify that they work in New York and pay city wage tax, which will calculate, or pay a works in Connecticut, pays non-resident taxes there, or might pay some other alimony, non-taxable New York. So if they pay non-resident or wage taxes in New York, you just check those boxes and it will be reflected if you're using our 1040 calculation. If you use the Appendix 9H or Circular E in your child support, it will not appear. That those changes will not be there because Circular E and Appendix 9H cannot handle the New York City wage tax calculation or the New York non-resident tax calculation. So that only works if you're using the IRS 1040 tax method in your child support case, and you want to specify that. And again, what you do is open one of the party sections, click this green button, and then look for the checkoffs for that type. So that's only in New Jersey. If you have a New Jersey case, you won't see that in other states if you load a different state. Children, this is the same. We've copied the information over from the original child support entry, so they're already here. People tell us that what we do is copy the PPR and say that's who the child's residing with, but maybe the child's still residing with both parents because even though they filed for divorce, they're still living together. So you can override these if you need to, or you could put in a different word. I'll say grandparents. So even though these fields are blue and calculated by the software, this is another instance where if it's correct to change them, you can and should change them. And if you change your mind and you want to go back, you can just go ahead and put the party's name back in there and you'll be good to go with the software's default. So those overrides are available and should be taken advantage of. In this case, this isn't a child of the current relationship, but this child it does appear and would be listed in the CIS, and it would be listed only as Blake's child. If I needed to add more kids while I'm doing it, I can add kids right here without going back to child support. I could just add a new line for a new child, or I can delete that child and confirm it if I didn't mean to add it. So there's a place to add, but otherwise we've already copied everything over from child support and added it in here. Scrolling down further, dates, pretty straightforward. Move through these fields with your mouse, or I prefer my tab key. You can go from line to line really quickly that way. The general rule is if you have the information, enter it. If the information is not relevant or you don't have it, skip the field. You're allowed to skip fields. You don't have to enter a 0 if there's a 0 value. Just skip the field if it doesn't apply to your case or if it's a 0 value. Finally, there's a place to use the professional employment information for both parties, enter that, and more than one employer, just add a second employer. And then finally, we are copying this from the professional information setup that was produced when you first set up the software. If you need to change that, go back to settings down here, and you can change your professional information over here on the, where did it go? Settings. You know, I'm still getting used to these menus myself. Here it is. It's under configuration, professional information. Whatever you put here will go onto every CIS automatically. So that's why it was showing up in my CIS. It was in settings. If you need to change it, you can go in here and change it so that it's set up correctly for you. I'm going to go back to the CIS, parties and children. and that information is carried to the attorney section here. I can overwrite it here if I want, but the idea is that we'll save you time. We'll put it in automatically for you. I didn't fill mine out completely, which is why some of this is blank, but yours would be filled out completely from the professional information. And they gave you a link directly to go there and change it if you need to. All right, that is the children's and screen, case information screen, also very straightforward. There's some summary information at the top. Blue fields, we've carried attorney information in again, parties' names. Here, yellow fields are for you. Yellow is for you. It's like I like to remind people, type in the yellow fields with your data. The old CIS didn't have, simply had description boxes. It just had a place to X the causes of action. So if you want the old type format, all you do is type an X next to the items you want to say they're in dispute. Or otherwise, you can type in whatever you want to add as a page note. So yellow fields, in this case, will left justify this X, so it looks like the old checkbox format, or yet you can put in text yourself. Scrolling down further, here's their names. I didn't type in addresses for them, otherwise they would have been filled out had I done it during child support. Here's the kids again, just listed. And then finally, we'll go down to the next section, miscellaneous, also very straightforward. Business employers, yes or no checkboxes, nothing fancy here. While I'm here, I will point out a couple of features you're going to see elsewhere, and these are things that help you customize your CIS. So we have what we call page notes, and you'll see this box, that's a page note. I can open it up and put a notation about anything in the miscellaneous information section right up at the top. We give you a single line, but you can also add additional lines if you want. The way you add additional lines is to click this edit box on the left, and then we'll open up a box. You can type in or copy and paste in as much information as you like and make that more than one line if you need to. You can also make it stand out by making it bold. I'm not going to do that in this case, but if I wanted to, there's a place to make page notes, and you'll see these throughout the CIS, a place to just add some clarifying information. There's also a place to make a footnote. I can click this box and this will put a footnote next to that line. I can type in my footnote information. I can make it bold. I can have it superscript EST appear next to the item if it's estimated, especially with numbers, that's helpful. And then finally, you can also use footnotes as reminders. I don't know anybody who does, but you could put it in there as a reminder. So that's another way to customize, is use the footnote control, and you see them all over the place to the right of any of these lines. The page notes are usually at the top and bottom of each section, footnotes just to the right. So those are ways to customize or add more information into your CIS without having to export into a word processor. You can do it right within the software and keep a single file with all your data in it. Next section is last year's, income for the CIS. And here's our page note place. I'm going to open up last year's income section, places to make footnotes, a place to make a page note just about last year's income if I want. And you'll notice we filled in what goes from the directly from the CIS form in here by virtue of the court rule, but you can make changes to these. If I say, it says same year, but if I wanted to say last year, for example, I could do that. I can make any notation there I want, and it'll turn red, meaning it's not the default value, but that's okay as long as I intend it. We help you fill this out in two ways. We'll do, the first way is very simple. If you want us to, we'll calculate the joint column by adding the Taylor and Blake columns together to get joint. If you'd rather do it yourself, you can uncheck that. Now all three columns are yellow and I can enter in anything I want. We also have a worksheet. The worksheet helps you if you have a tax return or W-2 you're working from. So using that worksheet will tell you line by line, go to Schedule F in your tax return, line 9 or line 50 to get farm income. Go down here, line 5A for pension income. So if you're working from a tax return, this worksheet can be helpful. If you're working from a W-2, you can enter the information from the W-2s for last year down here, add as many W-2s as you need to, and keep adding the information. We'll take that all over and put it into, if you check the box up here, we'll carry it in to the main last year's income section we were looking at a moment ago for you. So this is a second way to fill out that form. And that is either do it directly here or click the worksheet link, use the information on the worksheet from a tax return or W-2, and we'll fill this section in using that information. Check boxes, very straightforward. Check them if they applied. Don't check them if they don't. Present earned income, we give you sections for both parties. If you're only doing a CIS for one party, just fill in the section for your party. Don't worry about doing it for both. For mediators, maybe collaborative cases, you might want to put it in for both. But for a typical litigation case where you're only representing one party, just put the information in for just that party. You specify the pay period, how they're getting paid. We will produce a calculation of the number of weeks based on the dates you put in here. And then you're just going to type in the number directly from the pay stubs. The reason it's blue here in the middle is we're adding Social Security and Medicare to get a FICA number. The FICA is what's going to carry to the CIS, but most people have it broken down on their pay stub. So we give you a place to put in the breakdown, and then we'll add it together for you. Then finally at the bottom, we add all the other deductions as well and carry them to the CIS. So basically, this section is required, but what happens if your client is a realtor and only gets sporadic income when they sell a house, or maybe they have a different type of job where they only work a few months a year, and maybe they're a teacher and they have every summer off and they're not earning money during the summer. So sometimes this section can be tricky. If it doesn't fit your case, what I recommend people do is go down here and make a note, either fill this in or don't. And then make a note that explains why you can't give them a 3 pay stub spread by adding a page note to this section. Or fill it in and then indicate that it may not always be accurate because the party doesn't work 12 months a year. Something like that to just clarify. But in any event, the CIS sort of assumes that everybody gets paid a paycheck, and it may not be the case. So you have to do the best you can. Don't blame the messenger. We didn't invent this format. We're feeding it, but we didn't invent it. So if you have to use it when cases that don't fit, you have to be a little creative and get your own present earned income information in there without the pay stubs. The next two are year-to-date numbers. They want year-to-date earned income or year-to-date unearned income. For planners, there's a way to carry information in from elsewhere in the software, but that was confusing to a lot of people. So this first section says it's for budgets, accurate taxes, child support, and recommended. But if all you're doing is the CIS, you can skip through that section, scroll down lower, and then you'll find a section that says earned income for CIS only. This is what you want to use for the CIS only. It's just straight lines where you type in the numbers for the number of, you put in the dates, I'm sorry, up here at the top. And we count the weeks based on the dates. You fill in the gross numbers and we'll do the breakdown for you. The year-to-date unearned income works the same way. If you're just doing a CIS, open that section, scroll down to the CIS only section, open it up, and then you'll have a very basic view. If you want to do it for a complete entry for financial analysis, you probably would skip the CIS only section and instead use the part that would allow it to be for all budgets, all purposes within the software will carry the information. But generally, for just a CIS, look for that line that says CIS only. Finally, there is a additional information section, very straightforward. Tab through. If you need more than one line, use the box over here on the right to expand it and make as many lines as you like. So that is income. Expenses is the next section, and this is a part of the software that throws a lot of people. And let me explain why. Open up section A, and if I have only a single real property, here's all the information. Here's the description, here's the value, here's the mortgage balance, which I don't really need for a CIS. So that I just need the things that are going to go to my CIS. So that would be the description, the value, then the monthly payment, as well as who's making that payment. I need to put a separate description like marital residence or second home or something, vacation home, I could use the description field for that. Below it, you'll see that we now have a table for expenses for Lakeview Lane. And we have the typical column for joint and current lifestyle. Up here, I've specified Taylor is going to be making the payments for this residence. So down in this section, you'll see it says 100%, but somebody override the real estate taxes. I'm going to clear that out and not have her responsible for. I'm going to put in 100 instead, just to keep it accurate. I'm using my tab key. So now any expenses I put in either column are going to be attributed totally to Taylor, and that's how they'll show up on the CIS. But let's say there's a second property. If I add another property, what I'm going to see for the second property is a whole new section. Here's Lakeview Lane that we already looked at, but now here's a place. What's the value of the second property? I can say houseboat, and I didn't spell it very well, but I typed it. I'll say it's worth $300,000 because it's sinking, and the mortgage payment on the sinking houseboat is $1,500 a month. And right now, Blake is making those payments, and I can go down now and list my payments, and they'll all be attributed to Blake. So this is overkill. If you only have one property, you'll only need to fill in one. But if you have more than one, we had a lot of firms request the ability to show one parent living or one spouse living in their own residence and another renting, and separate expenses for each, or perhaps one's living in a vacation home, or maybe they're splitting the bills in one home and one's paying all the bills in another. So what we do, if you add more than one residence, we'll actually print several Schedule A's for you, one for each residence or one for each real property, I should say, on the CIS. And if you added tenant expenses, we'll add a tenant expense section in on the CIS as well. If you only have one property, that's not necessary, but if you have more than one property and you want that breakdown, you have the ability to have several Schedule A's, and one that reflects who's paying what, which party is making the payments on whatever property, and also the amounts that are attributable to any one property. So if you only have one, don't worry about it. Just enter the information for one property. If you want more than one property, keep adding them, and then we'll give you the choice when you go to print, and I'll show you that in a moment, how to print it with a breakdown or without a breakdown. Schedule B, just like you would expect, a bunch of fields for you to enter data. We total them. Schedule C is a little different in our software because we have our own budget. Our budget is much more granular and detailed than the CIS. So there's a few things that we do here that throw people sometimes, but it's really to your benefit and it's not hard to get around. For example, our budget has groceries and for the household and for the children separately. And I can generate using the software a separate children's budget if I have the web version or the full desktop version. So I can put that breakdown if I want, but the blue line is what's going to go on the CIS. So if I don't want the breakdown or I don't care, I could just go to the blue line and type in $450 a month. It'll be red because I overrode. What the software wants to do is total these two lines to contribute, or total that line, but instead I can put it directly on there as an override. If I change my mind and I don't want an override, I could put the amount on either of these lines and the software will carry it to the total line. So if I don't like red, I can just put the amount I want on either line. And if I do want a children's budget, and let's say I want to say 250 of it is attributable to the parents and 200 is attributable to the children, I can still get my 450 on my CIS, but I can print the children's budget that'll show this $200 breakdown. So that's one aspect of our expenses that's a little different. It helps you create that children's budget. There's also places where we have a more detailed granular budget than the CIS. So under the CIS has a line for hair care. We have adult, children, and manicure, pedicure. So if you want to add those in and put them in granularly, you can use these three lines, or again, just go to the total line and type in your number. That'll go to the CIS if you don't care for those breakdowns and don't intend to use the software's budget. If you do think you're going to use the budget for mediation purposes or otherwise, you will want to use each of the lines The adult versus children is strictly if you want that children's budget report. And I'll show you where that is at the very end. So that's what's different about our expense input is we give you these extra lines for breakdowns to match our budget if you want to use them. If you don't, just go to the blue lines. The blue lines are the ones that the CIS is going to require. So that's expenses. And finally, assets and liabilities. While I was doing, while we did expenses, I entered property, so they're already here. While we did child support, there had already been some assets added during child support data entry, so they're already here. And some of my assets are already filled out, but I could add more while I'm here simply by checking one of the green boxes and add in additional stuff. And we'll keep totaling it as you add it in. We automatically, if you say it's exempt, this vehicle is going to be exempt. If I check it as exempt, that's in it says put an asterisk after exempt on the actual CIS form. We ask you to check the box instead of an asterisk. And then we'll total that in the not subject to equitable distribution field for you if you check off that it is exempt from equitable distribution. Okay, so that is assets and liabilities. Finally, F and G. We give you 4 lines. If you need more, click the link here and type your brains out. You can also copy and paste, as I mentioned before, and expand that section to as long as you need. The rest of it is checkoffs. And so now we've gone through all of our sections for the CIS. I'm ready to print. What I want to do then is go to reports. And then on reports, I'll choose CIS case information statement. And I mentioned options. So I'm going to mention these options to you before we print anything. First is whose CIS are we producing? Make sure it's set for the party you want to produce for. You can print them for both if you're doing, as I mentioned, arbitration, maybe collaborative or mediation work. You could produce CISs for both parties. Footnotes, you have a choice as to where the footnotes go. I recommend this item, which is after each item. That'll put the footnote right next to the item in your CIS, and it'll be most useful that way. You can, however, do it like a book report, put them all at the end of the CIS, or you can put them after each section. For example, at the end of income or at the end of deductions, you can put all the footnotes that are relevant to those sections. But again, the most useful one is to have the footnote right next to the item it addresses. And so that's the one I would recommend you check off. Don't want footnotes at all, just check the master box and you will not see footnotes anywhere. But usually you'll leave that checked and then choose where you want them. The CIS in 2016, I believe, they added a page of pro se instructions. Some of our clients are generally not pro ses. So they're attorneys or law firms or mediators or professionals who don't need pro se information. So if you don't want those pro se instructions on the front page, you just uncheck the box and we'll get rid of them. If you do want them, they're there. We leave them on by default because that's what the official form looks like, but it really doesn't help anybody to have that extra page of pro se instructions when there's no pro se in the case. This other control is we have about 5 or 6 blank expense lines. If you're not using them, they'll be eliminated by default, but if I want to print them blank, you can choose to print them blank anyway by checking that box. Kind of an esoteric thing, but if somebody really wants their blank lines, you can make sure they print. So those are the controls for the instructions and blank lines. And then finally, I mentioned the Schedule A. Right now, by default, it's set up, since I had 2 properties, it's going to print 2 different Schedule A's. And it also then going to print a summary, which would be the typical Schedule A. So I'll have houseboat, residence, and then a summary of houseboat plus residence. That's the way it's set up now. If I only have a single Schedule A, it says clear the checkboxes. So if I just have 1 property, just clear those and I won't have to worry about that multiple Schedule A bit. But I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to leave these and I'll leave the summary in as well. This link, because we didn't know where else to put it, there's a place to view or print a blank CIS. It's just a PDF on our website, so you can print it out for a client or look at it yourself if you want to. That takes you out to our website. Then down here are the print previews for each section. If I want to preview a section without actually printing anything, I can click on its link. So I'll click expenses, and this is just how the expenses are going to print out. Since I didn't add any in this case, there really aren't a lot there. So I'll just click that. But while I'm on this, if I needed to change this number, 167, we don't recommend you do it on the print preview. That if you do it here, it's only going to happen when you print. That's the only place that number will show up. What we do instead is give you this link back to the original data entry point, and I can change that 167 here now on the original data entry point, and everything will remain consistent as opposed to doing it on the print preview. So that's what those links are about. If I'm on this screen and I click a preview and you see a link here that'll take you back to the original data entry point, that's where you want to make your changes, not so much on this screen. In a pinch, you can do an override here. When you do it on this screen, it will only come out on the printed CIS. It does not change your original data entry. So it can end up with a conflicting report if you make changes only on a print preview screen, which is why we recommend you don't do it that way. Instead, go back. However, you can view or any of the previews right here. And this control shows what sections you're going to print. If I only wanted to print expenses, I can check off just the expense section. Oops, I didn't mean to. I just meant to hit its checkbox. Now, when I click print only expenses, if I click this box, they're all going to print. So let's see what it looks like real quick. I'm going to click my PDF button. And I have two screens. This one just showed up. So here's my CIS in preview mode. These are the instructions I could delete if I don't want them. And so my CIS would start right with part A if I choose the control over here not to print the instructions. As I scroll down some more over here, you can see preview the entire CIS. If I'm happy with it, wait, I did want to show you the real estate part real quick. So here I'm in part D, monthly expenses, Schedule A shelter. Notice we now have expenses for Lakeview Lane as number 1. If I scroll down lower, number 2 is homeowner expenses for houseboat. They would be listed here. And then finally, the summary, which is the typical Schedule A. It's a total of all properties. And so it shows the mortgages for both properties, not just one or the other, as well as all the other expenses. So if I don't want to break down, the way I get rid of this breakdown is before I print my CIS, I go over here and uncheck these boxes. And now I'll just get my single Schedule A. And you can avoid having multiple Schedule A's, or add them in as your case may require, or as you prefer if you have multiple properties. So that's it.